Imagine a Christmas morning where a single red LED light felt like the peak of human innovation, or where a game of tennis played on your TV screen felt like stepping into Star Trek. The 1970s wasn't just about disco, it was the decade where playtime went digital. Today, we are revisiting the clunky, buzzing, battery-eating revolution of 20 forgotten gadgets that changed Christmas forever. Let's hit the power switch. We have to start with the monolith. Before this, video games were something you played in a smoky bar. The Atari Home Pong, released in 1975, brought the future into the living room. Technically, this wasn't a computer in the modern sense. It was a dedicated console built around a single custom chip that did one thing: bounce a square blip between two rectangles. The hardware was massive, a heavy plastic base with two built-in paddle knobs that had a very specific, satisfying resistance when you turned them. It connected to your TV via an RF switch box, a little metal slider you had to screw into the antenna terminals on the back of your set, forcing you to choose between Happy Days or Channel 3 gaming. The price tag was the real shocker. In 1975, this unit sold for nearly $100. Adjusted for inflation, that is over $550 today. Imagine asking your parents for a $500 toy that only plays one game in black and white. But the experience was hypnotic. The sound, that sharp, synthesized bip, 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 was the heartbeat of a generation. It was mesmerizingly simple, yet it introduced the concept of screen time. Its legacy is absolute. Without Home Pong proving that people wanted to interact with their televisions, the entire multi-billion-dollar gaming industry simply wouldn't exist. It turned the TV from a passive box into an active portal. Before the Game Boy, before the Switch, there was Mattel Auto Race. Released in 1976, this is widely considered the first all-electronic handheld game. The tech specs here are primitive but fascinating. It ran on a standard 9-volt battery, which it devoured with reckless abandon. The display wasn't LCD, it was just a column of red light-emitting diodes, LEDs. The memory was less than 512 bytes. That's not megabytes or kilobytes, just bytes. The entire game logic was hardwired into the circuitry. It felt like holding a chunky calculator that was trying to tell you a story. You played as a bright red dash. Your goal? Move from the bottom of the screen to the top 4 times, avoiding other dim red dashes representing cars. That was it. But in 1976, this cost around $25, which is roughly $130 today. For a screen that was essentially 3 vertical lines of red lights, the experience was stressful in the best way. You had a tiny gear shift to change speeds, and the sound was a series of angry buzzes. Its legacy is the concept of mobile gaming. If you grew up in the late 70s, you can still hear the 4 distinct tones of this flying, saucer-shaped nightmare. Released by Milton Bradley in 1978, Simon was a marvel of programming. Based on the Atari arcade game Touch Me, Simon used a TMS 1000 microprocessor, a legitimate computer chip, to generate random sequences of lights and sounds. The hardware was hefty, powered by 2 D-cell batteries and 1 9-volt or 4 D-cells depending on the model. It had 4 large translucent plastic panels that lit up with incandescent bulbs, not LEDs, which gave it a warm, glowing look. This was a luxury item. It debuted at Studio 54 in New York City. That's how cool it was. It retailed for about $25 to $30, which again is over $130 in today's money. It was an expensive test of memory. The experience was frantic. As the speed increased, the tones blended into a chaotic melody, and the plastic buttons clacked loudly as you desperately tried to keep up. It was multiplayer, it was solo, it was social. Its legacy is the pick-up-and-play mechanic. It didn't need a manual. While Simon was the disco party animal, Merlin was the nerd in the corner. Released by Parker Brothers in 1978, Merlin looked like a red telephone handset from the future. It was designed by NASA physicists, and it showed. The interface was a grid of 11 tiny red LEDs encased in red plastic buttons. It offered 6 different games, including Tic-Tac-Toe, Echo, a Simon clone, and Blackjack 13. It was powered by 6 AA batteries, which added significant weight to the device, making it feel like a serious piece of hardware. The price was steep, hovering around $30, or $140 adjusted for inflation. But for that price, you felt like you were getting a pocket computer. The experience was more cerebral than Simon. The buttons had a distinct, squishy membrane feel. The display required imagination. A blinking light could be a card, a musical note, or an enemy. The music machine mode allowed you to program up to 48 notes, making it one of the first accessible digital synthesizers for kids. Its legacy lies in multifunctionality. Merlin wasn't just a toy, it was a gadget. It paved the way for the idea that one device could hold multiple apps. This is the moment toys started talking back. Released by Texas Instruments in 1978, the Speak and Spell was nothing short of witchcraft. It was the first consumer product to use a single-chip voice synthesizer, the TMC-0280. Before this, talking toys used pull strings and mini record players, like Chatty Cathy. The Speak and Spell used linear predictive coding to synthesize human speech digitally. It had a chic orange plastic case, a membrane keyboard that was notoriously hard to press, and a vacuum fluorescent display, VFD, that glowed with a cool blue-green hue. At launch, it cost $50. Adjusted for inflation, that is a staggering $230. Imagine paying over $200 for a spelling toy today. But in 1978, this was cutting-edge tech. The experience was eerie. The synthesized voice was robotic and slightly garbled, pronouncing correct and wrong with a distinct Texas drawl hidden in the code. It felt intelligent. It felt like a companion. Its legacy is massive. It is the great-grandfather of Siri and Alexa. It normalized the idea of interacting with machines through voice and language, rather than just buttons and blips. If you walked into a middle school cafeteria in 1977, you saw this game. Mattel Electronics Football, technically Football I, was the darker, grittier cousin of Auto Race. The tech was similar: a column of red LEDs, a 9-volt battery, and a simple piezoelectric speaker. But the gameplay loop was addictively perfect. You were a bright LED dot trying to navigate through a shifting defense of dim LED dots. The hardware was iconic: a white handheld rectangle with a distinct bulge for the battery compartment that fit perfectly in your palm. It cost around $29.95, or roughly $150 today, for a game that looked like a pocket calculator having a glitch. But the price didn't matter because the gameplay was intense. You had to calculate gaps in the defensive line. The sound of the tackle, a digital raspberry noise, was devastating. The touchdown song was a triumph. This game was so popular that Sears couldn't keep it in stock. Its legacy is the democratization of sports gaming. It stripped football down to its strategic core, finding the hole in the line, and proved that graphics didn't matter as long as the mechanics were solid. We have to step back to 1972 for the true grandfather. The Magnavox Odyssey was the very first home video game console, predating Pong. The tech specs are bizarre by modern standards. It didn't have a CPU. It didn't have sound. It was a purely analog, digital hybrid machine powered by batteries. It came with plastic overlays that you had to physically tape to your TV screen to simulate color and graphics. If you wanted to play Haunted House, you taped the Haunted House overlay to the glass. The system cost $99 in 1972, which is over $700 today. It was a luxury item sold exclusively at Magnavox dealers, often implying you needed a Magnavox TV to use it. You didn't, but the marketing was confusing. The experience was ethereal. You controlled a square of light. That was it. But combined with the overlays, the dice, and the playing cards included in the box, it was a bridge between board games and video games. Its legacy is existence itself. Ralph Baer, the inventor, fought for the idea that a TV could be interactive. Every PlayStation and Xbox in your home owes a debt to this battery-operated white box. Texas Instruments strikes again. Released in 1976, the Little Professor looked like a calculator, but it worked in reverse. Instead of you typing in numbers to get an answer, the device gave you the equation, and you had to type the answer. It was a reverse calculator. The tech specs included a red LED display, and a charming graphic of a professor with a mustache on the faceplate. It didn't speak like the Speak and Spell. It just flashed numbers. It ran on a 9-volt battery, which seemed to last longer here than in the Mattel games. It cost just under $20, or about $100 today. That's a steep price for a math quiz, but parents loved it. It was educational. The experience was surprisingly gamified. If you got the answer right, the professor did a little digital dance on the screen. If you got it wrong, it displayed EE for error. It was strict. Its legacy is the entire genre of edutainment. It showed that handheld electronics could be sold to parents as learning tools, a marketing strategy that Nintendo would later exploit with Brain Age. This is the Forgotten Pioneer. Released by Milton Bradley in 1979, the Microvision was the very first handheld game console with interchangeable cartridges. The Game Boy wouldn't arrive for another decade. The tech was strange. The CPU and the screen were actually on the cartridge, not the console. The base unit was just a shell with batteries, a wheel controller, and a keypad. The screen was a tiny 16 by 16 pixel LCD, one of the first liquid crystal displays in gaming. It sold for roughly $50, $210 today, with games costing extra. The experience was fragile. The LCD screens were notorious for screen rot, darkening over time until they were unplayable. The flagship game, Blockbuster, was a decent breakout clone, but the refresh rate was so slow the ball would ghost across the screen. Despite its flaws, its legacy is undeniable. It established the form factor: screen on top, controls on bottom, swappable games. It was a decade ahead of its time, and it failed so the Game Boy could run. Now for the Imposter. Released by Tomy in 1977, Blip looked like a video game. It was shaped like a console. It had a red translucent screen. It made mechanical whirring noises. But here's the secret. It wasn't electronic. It was electromechanical. Inside, there was a small motor, spinning a plastic reel with an LED light shining through it. The ball was just a light moving physically behind the screen. But to a kid in the 70s, it looked like Pong. It cost significantly less than the electronic games, around $10 to $15, $50 to $70 today, making it the budget option. The experience was frantic and noisy. The gears ground loudly as the timer wound down. You had to physically anticipate the ball's movement. It was essentially a wind-up toy disguised as a computer. Its legacy is the brilliant marketing of the era. It captured the aesthetic of the digital revolution without the expensive microchips. It remains a cult classic for its clever, non-digital engineering. If Atari was the Coke of the 70s console wars, Coleco was the Pepsi. The Telstar series, launching in 1976, was a line of dedicated Pong clones. But the Telstar Arcade stands out. It was a triangular console. One side had a steering wheel, one side had a gun, and one side had paddles. The tech specs relied on the General Instrument AY38500 chip, the Pong on a chip that allowed anyone to make a console. It ran on batteries or a generic AC adapter that got dangerously hot. The Telstar Arcade sold for around $75, or nearly $400 today. The experience was novelty overload. You could drive, shoot, and play tennis all on one machine. The gun looked surprisingly realistic, a revolver, which definitely wouldn't fly today. The graphics were standard black and white blocks, but the physical controls made it immersive. Its legacy is the peripheral. It introduced the idea that a standard controller wasn't enough. Sometimes you need a steering wheel to feel the speed. Another Tomy classic from 1978. Like Blip, Digital Derby walked the line between mechanical and electronic. It was a handheld driving game where you held a steering wheel and watched a scrolling track. The digital part was largely marketing, though it did have a battery-operated lap counter. The tech involved a scrolling drum of plastic film that simulated the road, backlit by a bulb. If you crashed, the car made a jarring mechanical rattling sound. It cost around $15, $75 today. The experience was surprisingly visceral. The scrolling road gave a real sense of speed, that the LED blips of Mattel Auto Race couldn't match. You had to physically steer the little plastic car left and right. It was loud, clunky, and ate batteries just to spin the motor. Its legacy is the simulation genre. It tried to simulate the cockpit experience, putting the speedometer and lap counter right in your face. You sank my battleship, but this time the computer told you. Released by Milton Bradley in 1977, this took the classic pen and paper game and gave it a brain. The tech was impressive. A large plastic board with a membrane keyboard and a grid of lights. You inputted coordinates, and the computer determined a hit or miss with a specific sound effect, a whoosh for a miss and a satisfying explosion noise for a hit. This was a centerpiece gift, costing upwards of $40 or nearly $200 today. That is a massive investment for a board game, but the experience was transformative. You didn't have to trust your cheating older brother anymore. The computer was the impartial judge. The sound effects added tension that the silent version never had. Its legacy is the hybridization of board games. It proved that adding a battery in a chip could revitalize a 50-year-old game, a trend that continues with app-assisted board games today. The cooler, blue-tinted brother of the Little Professor. Released by Texas Instruments in 1977, Dataman was a math toy, but it was designed to look like a robot. It was shaped specifically to look like a character from a sci-fi movie, with glowing eyes, the display, and a chunky blue body. The tech was similar to the Professor, a calculator chip repurposing math into games like Force Out. It cost around $25, $130 today. The experience felt like interacting with a droid. The Electro Flash display was a vacuum fluorescent display, giving it that futuristic blue-green glow that was far superior to the angry red LEDs of its competitors. It had a memory bank where you could store a number, which felt like high-level computing at the time. Its legacy is character design in gadgets. It wasn't just a tool, it was a friend. It gave a personality to the algorithm. Released by Coleco in 1979, the Quiz Whiz was the trivia king. It was a small, handheld computer that looked a bit like a futuristic magnifying glass. The tech was interesting. It used interchangeable cartridges/books. You would read a question from a printed book, type the answer code into the device, and it would beep and flash green for yes or red for no. It didn't actually know the trivia. It just verified the numerical code. The starter set was about $20, $85 today. But the real money was in the cartridge books, which were sold separately. The experience was fast-paced. It had 1,001 questions in the starter kit. The satisfying bloop of a correct answer was addictive. It was the grandfather of Trivial Pursuit, digitized. Its legacy is the razor and blade business model in electronic toys. Sell the hardware cheap and make a fortune on the software expansion packs. Milton Bradley loved computerizing logic games. Released in 1977, Comp 4 was essentially a digital version of the board game Mastermind. The tech involved a column of red LEDs and a keypad. The computer would generate a random sequence of numbers, and you had to guess it. It would tell you how many numbers were correct and in the right place. It retailed for about $30, $140 today. The experience was pure logic. It was a game for the quiet kid who liked puzzles. The red LEDs were stark and unforgiving. There was no graphics, just data. But the feeling of cracking the code and seeing the winning light sequence was a rush. Its legacy is the number puzzle genre. Think Sudoku or Wordle. It was a brain trainer long before that term existed. In 1979, Milton Bradley released what was essentially the first programmable robot for the home. Big Track was a six-wheeled futuristic tank that looked like a prop from Star Wars. The tech was revolutionary. It had a keypad on the back where you could program a sequence of up to 16 commands. Go forward 5 lengths, turn right 30 degrees, fire laser. You hit go, and it executed the macro. It cost $40, roughly $170 today. The experience was an introduction to coding. You weren't driving the car, you were programming it. You had to think spatially and logically. If you messed up the code, the tank would crash into the cat. It also had a photon beam bulb and loud firing sounds. Its legacy is STEM education. This was the ancestor of modern educational robots like Lego Mindstorms. It taught an entire generation the basics of inputs and outputs. Released by Milton Bradley in 1978 to capitalize on the space craze, the Starbird was an electronic space transport. This wasn't a console. It was a physical ship you flew with your hand. The tech was motion sensing, sort of. It had a ball-bearing tilt switch inside. When you pointed the nose up, the engine sound pitch increased, accelerating. When you pointed it down, the pitch dropped, decelerating. If you shook it, it made laser sounds. It cost around $25, $110 today. The experience was immersive role play. The ship itself could separate into a smaller fighter and a main cruiser. The electronics responded to your physical play, which was mind-blowing. The sound wasn't just a button, it was reactive. Its legacy is motion control. The accelerometer in your Wii Remote or your smartphone can trace its lineage back to the crude ball-bearing switch inside the Starbird. We give Atari all the credit, but the Fairchild Channel F, 1976, did it first. This was the first console to use a microprocessor and interchangeable ROM cartridges. Before this, Pong clones had the games built in. If you wanted a new game, you bought a new console. Fairchild changed the physics of the industry. The tech included the funky hockey puck controllers, which you could twist, push, and pull, a true precursor to the joystick. The system launched at $169.95. Hold on to your wallet. That is nearly $900 in today's money. It was wildly expensive innovation. The experience was colorful but crude. The graphics were blocky, but the ability to pop in a cartridge and completely change the machine's function felt like magic. It failed commercially because Atari had better marketing and better arcade ports, but its legacy is the cartridge slot. It invented the business model of the console industry. We end our list in 1979 with the gadget that killed the 70s and birthed the 80s, the Sony Walkman. While not a toy, it was the ultimate electronic gadget of the Christmas season at the decade's close. The tech specs were a marvel of miniaturization. It didn't record, it only played. This removed the bulky recording heads and allowed it to be small enough to clip to a belt. It had 2 headphone jacks because Sony thought it would be rude to listen alone. A hotline button even lowered the volume so you could talk to your friend. It cost $150 initially, which is about $600 today, a massive luxury. The experience was private. For the first time in history, you could have a soundtrack to your life. You could shut out the world. The sound quality, compared to a transistor radio, was high fidelity. Its legacy is the iPod and the smartphone. It changed music from a shared experience, a jukebox, a home stereo, to a personal portable isolation bubble.